Greetings, listeners. Welcome to How the World Should Work, the podcast with a purpose, where we talk about things that actually matter. This is your host speaking, author, journalist, and otherwise aimlessly wandering millennial, Matt Shao. I'll be hosting alongside my good friend Johnny here. As many in my generation can probably relate to, and many who aren't, I spent several years after college trying to navigate the endlessly frustrating world of business to carve out what I was told was a successful life for myself. 6 years in the insurance industry, followed by a year of owning a small business, made me feel like I was on a decent track. Until August the 4th, 2015, when my world was turned upside down. That was the day I lost my mother and best friend, and suddenly every priority of mine completely shifted. I began to look at life from a totally different angle, and as a result, decided to drop everything and pursue writing. A dream my mother had pushed me towards my entire life, but one I was always too scared to chase. Fast forward 2 years, and I'm now a published author, a columnist at my local newspaper, an ever-growing blogger, and now we have a podcast. Which brings me to the point at hand. Here you'll be listening to topics pulled from various themes and motifs from my main writing project, the Continuity series. Although the primary purpose, as with any work of fiction, is to entertain, it also serves as a platform to express many of the thoughts and feelings we all seem to have with this crazy world we're living in. From deeper issues like social equality to lighter things such as modern dating, we'll be covering a wide array of things that we all seem to think about but don't seem to talk about very frequently. So with all that said, allow me to introduce our co-host, Mr. Gentleman Johnny Wiggins.
My name is Jonathan Wiggins. I've decided to join this project because I truly believe in what it stands for. Our goal here isn't to use this as a soapbox, so all you can just hear us talk. Instead, we hope that by talking about these issues, we can help create a better awareness of the things that affect our lives. By talking about these issues that we otherwise tend to ignore, I think we'll get a much better understanding of them, which can help us apply this newfound understanding to our lives in a meaningful way.
The trumpets are sounding. Do y'all hear that? No, I'm just kidding. So here we are, our season finale, and yesterday, coincidentally, was the total eclipse. Did anyone see any of the videos that people posted about the pranks, the trumpets playing when the pointed? Nobody saw that?
No, I missed that.
Okay, so yeah, there was a couple people that this is kind of messed up, and it goes along with this topic. But there were a couple videos that I saw where, at the point of totality, there's like a lot of people talking beforehand about the second coming and all that.
Yeah.
Some people thought it would be a good idea to play trumpets and stuff in the background. So yeah, messed up a little bit, but it's kind of funny. Let's not, we don't like to take ourselves too seriously here.
That's a second episode of humor in that.
Let's we're not making fun of anybody's beliefs or anything, but let's all be able to take a joke. So this topic is going to be on religion and spirituality. It's gonna be we're gonna focus on not having any sort of aggressive conflicts here, any disagreements, because obviously I'll introduce, so tonight we have obviously myself, Johnny, and Will. You're all familiar with them. Mike Hart is here, Rick is here, and Chad Grindstaff is here. Chad's been with us before, and I will actually, if you guys just, Chad identifies as, we'll just lay this out now, as a Christian, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're just going to get this out front. Will identifies agnostic.
That's
correct?
right. Yep.
Nick, what term would you say?
If you had to classify it, I would say atheist.
Atheist.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mike Christian, right? Okay, and Johnny Christian, correct?
Yeah. If you're
Ish.
Which is good. No, it's good because you
Well,
have.
that's the same with me. I mean, I'm atheist, but there's still some holdbacks to pure atheism.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't, it comes with the job title, right? There are some, and myself, I don't really, and that kind of all, it all goes into the whole labeling thing, it's like, is it really necessary even? Because I think it's ultimately, this whole topic is something that everyone, this is the topic, really, if you ask me. You know, like when everything is done throughout the day, your job's over, all the crap we all the hats we put on at work are all taken off, and you're sitting at home, you know, playing with yourself and watching television, you know, whatever you're doing. No, but seriously, I'm joking, obviously, but seriously, like, that's the kind of things that, like, the thoughts that go through your mind. It's like it's like existentialism. What does it really mean to be here? And what do I really believe is going to happen after I'm not here anymore? So I think this is really a good way to end, the first season. So thank you guys for coming. So the first thing, actually I forgot. I'm uncertain. I don't know if you want to call it agnostic or whatever. It applies to the book. Carson, the character, struggles with it. He's basically, his views mimic my views. Jennifer, the co-protagonist, is a NASA astrophysicist in the science field, so obviously she is in an arena where this is not the most prevalent topic. You know, religion. I know religion and science kind of clash a lot. But Jennifer is what they call, and I call it in the book, a quote, closet Christian, where she firmly believes in it, you know, in God. She has a strong faith system, and that dynamic plays out through, you know, her and Carson's story in the first book a little bit, and obviously when the second one, when it finally comes out, it will play out even more. So there is a large theme within the book of with religion. So the quotes that we're going to start out with that pertain to this are, let's see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 that I picked out, and the first one is this. It was said by George Harrison. All religions are branches of one big tree. And I'm not going to comment really on these quotes. I'm just going to let them sift and let you interpret them as you may, because I've got, one on both sides. The second is by a man named Karl Marx, who I want to comment, I think is a vastly misunderstood person in the history books. Just saying. But he said this: religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. And I know the opium of the masses is a familiar, comment that we hear in pop culture or whatnot. But Dan Brown, the author of Angels and Demons, and what was the other one?
Da Vinci Code? The
Da Vinci Code. That was actually his main one, yeah. Tom Hanks said this.
Dante's something, but in his new
Dante's Inferno,
what?
maybe, or Dante. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So Dan Brown said this: science and religion are not at odds. Science is simply too young to understand. I like that statement. I mean, I think that captures a good sentiment behind it, and it is, maybe he's right. That's kind of the whole point. So the last one is Jonathan Swift, and honestly, I don't know who that is, but I like this quote. But Jonathan Swift said, "We have just enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another." And I thought that was actually a...
it's very relevant.
Regardless of the decision, or at least the stance that we take, that is a relevant statement because it illustrates a very...
Gulliver's Travels.
Is that who that was?
I'm going to check real quick. I think
I'm ashamed as an author, yeah. See, I should know those things.
You should know.
And the Dan Brown thing I was thinking of is just called Inferno, but it was related to
Dante's Inferno, right. That makes sense. So those are just some quotes to get the wheels turning in your head and kind of but again, this is going to be a very open-ended conversation. I'm assuming it's probably going to take the length where we're going to have to split it up if I had to guess. But I'm going to start out, we're going to go around, and I want you guys to just open-endedly explain where, actually, I don't know if you want to start out with where you are today or where you started, but I want to know where you are today in your religious path, on your religious journey, if you will. How you got there, maybe some of the obstacles or struggles you had in getting there, where you started, how you were raised and what you were taught to believe originally, and how that evolved. So just basically your story of, how you got to the current belief, and do you see that? I will stop there. How you got to currently, we'll talk later about where this is going to go. But so let's start out with Chad. Would you like to start out with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I was born Christian. In a Christian home, and grew up with it. My grandfather's a minister. My dad's a minister. My mom's a minister. So I know a lot of pastors. I've known a lot of different churches growing up, and it's been very close to home. Like, it's been a really big part of me growing up, and it was pretty difficult. I have to say, like, that was the toughest. I think the toughest part of my childhood was always dealing with people leaving the church. That was really tough to handle, because when I was a kid, I didn't understand it, why somebody would leave.
Like not
leave the church,
but like actually leave God. You mean?
Not necessarily, no. But like leave the congregation.
Oh, so leave your
Okay,
congregation.
so they weren't
right.
leaving the faith.
Yeah, they're not.
I didn't know if that's what you meant.
I was really a kid. It didn't really matter to me. All I really knew is
They were gone.
they didn't hang out anymore.
Okay.
Until they take.
I didn't know if that was a metaphor or not.
Yeah, no. Sorry. And a lot of times it'd be my friends, leaving, and that was tough. That was a tough thing to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that, it really brewed in me. So I had like this really strong sense of faith growing up, at least, belief in God and everything. But there was like a seed of resentment there, kind of birthed as a child in me, and it began to grow, and to the point where I was so resentful of just the church in general. I just couldn't stand it. Like, it was just your typical hypocritical Christian, lying people,
When did that
thieves. When did what start?
When did that
That
the
thought,
frustration kind of?
Probably sometime in college.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I think is-
When you started to kind of get off, you flowed the coop, and kind of developed independent.
Yeah, and I lived a couple, and I never really. It was the idea of God always made sense to me.
Right.
The idea of spirituality, at least, always made sense to me.
I think a lot of Christians go through that, though.
Yeah.
Once we hit our preteens, our teens, college years, we're already questioning everything.
Yeah, a lot of angst.
So,
Yeah, so but there is, and I'll grant that there is a level of, like, at least how I think of it is, for like when somebody says don't use the Lord's name in vain, right? It means typically it means don't curse, don't say GD or something like that.
Right.
But to me, it's really always meant, don't claim to represent God, or don't claim to say something that God is saying when it's not Him saying it. And I think that's because then you just kind of start
don't invoke God and tell Him what to do.
Right. No, sure.
That's
Because
actually
when you're
really-
saying GD, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that is the take on that for
Yeah.
sure.
That's a really good point that I don't think I've never heard of anybody bring that up before, but you're right, because
I'm like representing God on my own behalf, essentially.
yeah, don't
My
bring
own.
God into your vanity.
Right.
That's really what that statement means.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because I literally never thought of it until you just said it.
Yeah.
I always thought, do not take the Lord's name in vain meant don't say GD.
And it can.
I mean, I
Sure.
thought that was like
I think-
the written in stone rule of
Right.
what that rule meant. I really just thought that that's what it meant. But you're right. Don't bring God into your vanity.
Yeah.
Is really the sentiment. It's more of a concept, not necessarily a rule. So
Well,
that's a
that's-
really
To
good-
what he was saying, though, it just hit me right now. I mean, of course, in the back of my mind, I've always realized that GD, you're telling God to damn someone.
Right.
But I don't ever think I say it more than I should, certainly. But when I think about it, I just think of it like saying crap or anything.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not thinking like God should damn his mortal
you're
soul.
actually cursing
I guess-
something. Not cussing. You are cursing someone.
Right.
In context, you're right, because you are asking. I guess I never thought of it.
And
You're
it's no
asking
different
God to damn something.
Right.
Say, God, damn that. It's
Yeah,
like
it's no different than. I mean, it is different, but it's not really that different from like a voodoo doll or
Right.
anything like or rattling chicken bones or whatever.
Well, I'm sure that's the way
all-
it started.
right.
so. Chad, you've already opened our minds to at least one thing, which is the goal of this entire podcast. So, thank you for that.
I always had a theology teacher kind of lead off of this that told me that just like saying "Oh God," like that's invoke that's
a
opening
version.
Well, it's opening a dialogue with God. So, and until you say Amen, you haven't closed that dialogue. So
That's kind of rigid.
yeah. So that's how he would pitch it, so that we wouldn't be so liberal.
That's
Exactly. But he always
Copy that.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't say over.
Yeah.
You got the bookend on the other.
But it worked on some of my friends. I never thought of it that way before either. So it's kind of the same kind of.
Yeah.
I just never.
What a funny little quirky thing there. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's like when you sneeze, the devils can get into your soul until somebody says bless you. Until they say
That's where that came from.
Well,
Yeah, right?
I think it came
That is
from the
another thing I
plague.
didn't know.
Actually, it came from the plague.
Yeah. Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, well, it doesn't really
Demons
show.
could
It doesn't
get
really
inside.
show up before the mass plagues and
Okay.
stuff in Europe.
Huh.
Sneeze somebody. You're not
Right.
just blessing them for them.
Yeah.
You're blessing them for you too, because you don't want to get a plague.
I don't want your demons. Isn't it funny? All these little colloquialisms or whatever you call them, like they all started somewhere and they all have a base in truth. And so yeah, it's funny to examine and kind of figure out where they all came from. Like why do we have these what are they called, cliches, and these habits that we all have that we're just taught and trained and conditioned to know, like where did they come from? There is a creative mind behind all of it. But anyway, Chad, continue. So you had your struggle, it sounded like, in college.
Yeah,
A little
that's
bit of a resentment. So where are you today?
Well, that's a good little segue you had there, because I realized at some point, I started to have new friends, new ideas, and new hobbies. So I was out there experiencing what the world had to offer me, and I was a little tired of just church in general. I didn't go to church at all while I was in school, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
What'd your parents think about that?
They're fine with it. I mean, really, I don't know. I've never asked them. I suppose they never give me a hard time about
Gotcha.
it. But
If they hear this, send them an email.
But like I'd have friends, roommates would go to church, and I don't have any interest in going.
But you didn't lose your faith, right? Or did you?
At one point in time, I had some stuff was going on in my life. It was a really tough time, and I just was like, God, if you're real, I need to know it for myself, and so I took everything in my life prior to that point. I didn't just throw it away, because I don't like doing that, because I think that's how you get born into like extremism, is by just like saying, okay, screw all this stuff and just throwing it out, So I was trying to be reasonable with myself. I'm going to set this aside here. I'm just going to go, and I just started doing my own studies. I'd hang out with my own crowd, and I was just science stuff. That's all I was studying. I was just going. I wanted to learn more about consciousness, and cell structure and stuff like that, and atoms. And I wanted to go right down to the core, of what the universe really is, and then kind of work myself, out of it and see if I could come up with something myself. So I did, and that, man, opened a strange thing, and that's when I became keenly aware of supernatural things. Actually, it was when I set everything aside and went and studied science for myself. It became like hyper supernatural for me. It was a very strange experience.
And by supernatural, elaborate. Like,
yeah, this is something
like extra dimensional. I know it's hard. It's not something that's explicable, probably. But something that like an unconscionable force that's governing what's behind all of this. Like, what do you mean by supernatural?
Or vampires.
Or do you mean, yeah? Or do you mean
I
vampires?
got really into Twilight.
We're basically vetting your
You read the books
findings
first.
Yeah.
Well, there's, the prior times I've been here, we almost kind of touched on some of this stuff, and I just stay away from it a lot of times because I don't like really going there because it sounds ridiculous. I'm a very skeptical person. I'm skeptical of myself, the way I perceive things.
Right.
I'm skeptical of other people.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical of just everything.
But honestly, let's not, let's not undermine anyone here, obviously.
Right.
But what do you mean, though? I mean,
No, I'm getting there. Yeah, well, okay, I'm sorry. I preface things too much, I suppose, but the...
Ghosts?
Awareness. Just sheer awareness. Like an understanding. For instance, in this... The only... When I've gone back and read things in the scripture later on in my life, like now, and when I read it now, it makes a lot more sense to me because some things I read some things like when somebody's trying to describe something supernatural in the Bible, you understand it's like they're describing a shadow.
Right.
Right? You can't, with my tongue, I cannot explain to your ears exactly what it is that exists outside of this because it's like hyper real.
Right.
It's a hyper reality. I can't
not
go
perceiving
there.
it. It's difficult to explain.
You
something
have
you can't
to experience
perceive. Right.
it, and
It's like the color red to a blind person, right?
Yeah.
Well, and this, like I said, no judgment here, but it's like, are you saying that you've kind of had glimpses beyond the veil?
Yeah, like what? Like I'm trying to more
I'm trying to get there.
finitely define. Yeah.
Right. So
The suspense is killing me.
I've had very distinct instances over a few of them over time, and the first being the one that terrified me. It genuinely scared me, and I was in my studies and I was studying things, and I had some sort of awareness just about me, and that's the only way I know how to explain it is in awareness. And I knew for some reason my neighbor's life was in imminent danger. I just knew it. I had no knowledge of anything. And the following day, I found out that he had a heart attack, like a severe heart attack. And when I heard this, it scared me so much. That was when I was like, I kind of went back into that box. I was like, okay, God, if
Right, yeah.
I don't want to ever know anything like that again unless I can do something about it. Because that's ridiculous.
That's White Noise, the movie White Noise for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very scary thing. And that's why I say skeptical, because when people start talking about this kind of stuff, it gets a little weird.
No,
you start to wonder about stuff.
Yeah.
And I think people are more open to it than they might let on a lot of times. So maybe I'm just a little over defensive about it. But
I'm glad you share. We'll get to me later, but I can empathize with that. That's all I'll say now.
yeah.
But
So time went on. I was dealing with my stuff. I was going through a lot of stuff myself personally. That was kind of happening. I didn't really find God in that. I just found something that was insane to me. It was just unexplainable and
were there
unreasonable.
psychedelics involved?
Huh?
Were there psychedelics involved?
No.
Okay.
Not at the time.
Well, let's because I want to make that distinction because that happens a lot. It produces a lot, and let's be honest, with ourselves, that's more prevalent than any of us want to admit.
It's anesthesia involved instead of psychedelics, but that's going to be one of the stories that I'll share later on when we get there.
I want everything about this talk and this whole movement, everything that I represent as a human. Like, I want people to be okay with acknowledging that we're all human beings. We all have these similar stories. We all have these similar experiences that we're so scared of getting out in the open because we're so afraid of how other people are going to perceive it.
Right.
And it's astonishing how similar we're going to realize all of us really are by simply just getting it all out in the open. That's why I like what Courtney Edmondson is doing. Like, her whole Thursday Thrive thing is about that, telling a story and all that,
Like, that's her whole brand, is like, come out with it. Like, let us know. Nobody knew what was going on in her in high school.
I had no idea until
Right.
I read it
You know?
in her blog or whatever.
And did anyone judge her for it?
No.
No. And if they
I
do,
actually thought better of her because of
that's
her life.
that's the exact. Can you hear me? That's fine. And if they do judge her, screw them.
Right.
Like, that's kind of the point. You're actually weeding out the jerks, and you're getting the real.
That's kind of the thing. It's like my friend told me one time, he said, somebody could tell me I didn't go to Disney World. They can say that all they want, but I went to Disney World, and you can believe whatever you want.
Right,
it just
yeah.
doesn't change the matter of the fact.
Unless your friend's crazy.
So let's
He really didn't go to Disney World.
for the sake of brevity, let's put a cap on that. And today, now, where you stand. So you're strongly God, right? God is there.
Well, I can wrap that up fairly quickly. I discovered that the people that I was hanging out with that were telling me all these things that I always wanted to hear about the church, and that there's hypocritical stuff and whatnot, and it helped me, but at the same time, after a couple years, I realized these people were just as scummy, if not more, than anybody I ever knew in church. And I felt very betrayed because I felt like they were trying to steal something from me. It bothered me a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like, and they wanted to talk all this nonsense about hypocrisy, and I was like, well, you're a jerk, 'cause,
The hypocrites calling you.
and,
I mean,
so-
there's some.
So so
amazing
I grew
irony.
up. I found out that my faith wasn't my own up until that point, and I had lived off of my parents' faith, and that was kind of what I began to discover. And there was one moment that will always stick out to me in my life is I heard God say to me, not audibly, but inwardly. It was that I was in the middle of working, and I just had this thought: if you went to hell, would you say that I'm good? And
It's a powerful question.
And I said yes, and it rocked my world. I said they dragged me into hell kicking and screaming, and I would tell them that you're good. And that changed my life. That moment changed my life, and I pivoted because it revealed something about me, and I realized not at that point that I was never proving anything to God, but God was proving something to me.
So wait, that question applied to God. Was he good, or was Chad good? Just so I
God.
Okay. So you're saying if
By the way, I wasn't laughing at Chad's answer.
spilling water.
Chad tried to take a drink of water and it
Chad-
dumped all his
Chad has
children.
a-
yeah. I mean, this is that's a powerful moment we just had there. Who cares about the water dripping down there? But so you're saying, so if Chad were sent to hell, you're saying you would still say, despite the fact that Chad's lived what I would consider, I have a lot of respect for you. All of us probably do. You are class president.
Don't forget it.
People don't forget. Yeah, like you're obviously thought out. Like you care about these things. That in my opinion constitutes the fabric of in what I think would dictate somebody to be a good person. Right. I think most of us would agree with that. So even if God were to send you to hell, you would still consider God good. You're saying.
It was a part of accepting myself. It really was, because that's like I appreciate you saying that, but like to me, myself, I might not think that about myself. You know what I'm saying?
But okay.
So it was really like helping to reveal, and I don't try to apply that. That's where I think a lot of religion can go wrong, and I don't want to get into that, but I'm not trying to apply my experiences to what like a doctrine that other people should be like, well, what would you say if you no, that's not
and we're gonna get to that.
Yeah,
There's gonna be questions. I mean, there's questions that I will ask you guys directly that I will expect answers to.
But very personally, revealed something.
To
about
be honest, because those are things that one should think about. Because I think there is a unfortunate reality that a lot of religions teach where you aren't allowed to question God, and it's disrespectful to question God, and I do not think that is a fair relationship. And is that something that God would agree with? Is God up there if he exists, and is he saying, no, you're not allowed to question me what I say, or does he say, yes, question me?
If God's the truth, he can't be scared of questions.
That's my point exactly. And if God is what people say he is, then you're right. Why would he fear questions? There's no point for that. So we will get to that. But okay, so that makes sense what you said. I mean that I think that was a good capsule
today.
Yeah, good capsule to where you are today. Will. Go.
All right. Well, I was raised Methodist, and for I'd say probably the first 10 to 12 years of my life, we were at church every Sunday. You know, we honestly would skip like Christmas just because it would be so crowded and packed, and we just didn't want to deal with it. You know, the only time we ever really dressed up nice was on Easter. You know, other than that, it was just a collared shirt and khakis. But on Easter, we had our coats and our ties on. You know. And then, and I mean, I was Methodist until I stopped identifying as religious. I went to Catholic high school here in town, JP2. So I kind of got an overload of religion for 4 years, and that kind of pushed me to where I am now. And I don't know. Yeah, I know, right? I don't want to blame it on JP2 at all. Like it's not their fault, I would say. But I'm not going to say they helped at all.
Which is another topic we'll cover as we go.
But...
Oh, hold on. Pause for a second.
Yeah.
Ages. Chad is 30. Will is...
24.
Nick is 30. Mike is... 38. Johnny... 24, and I'm 30. Okay, so just context, you know, so people know. Continue, sorry.
But... You know, and for most of the time that I was religious, I wasn't really religious. I was only going to church because Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, you know, mom and dad were waking me up saying, get dressed, get ready, let's go, come on. And I'm going,
Right.
And,
So do you think you've ever really bought into it?
I think there was, no.
Okay.
I never really bought into it. I put on the pretty face, and I put on the nice smile, and I shake everybody's hand, and when I really realized I needed to stop, not that I feel like it's necessary to stop going to church, because I mean, yeah, I'm not saying it's bad to go to church or anything, but I feel like for me it was because I was going for all the wrong reasons at some point.
Okay.
Because I'll admit, there for a while, it was every time I found some new cute girl that I was interested in, that was every time some sort of relationship was forming with somebody, yeah, of course I was there. I was hanging out with them, like, you know.
And that made you feel kind of grimy.
Yeah, it made me feel grimy. Yeah,
Sheo certainly didn't go to the Church of Christ Church for any reason.
Oh no!
But that
I was, to my credit, let's not drag me through the mud that far. To my credit, you know, I was raised Catholic. We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
But,
Julie, well played.
I think that's an appropriate response, though, because whether you're religious or not, if you keep going to church, you're bearing false witness.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't believe what they're saying. So, like, if you have influence over someone else, like some little kid sees you rolling your eyes in the middle of church, you probably shouldn't be there. You should probably be doing something else so that you're not influenced in one way or another.
Right, no, yeah, I kind of...
That was the locker room speak when everybody was talking, like, Matt's dating the hot blonde shit, you know. That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah,
He's playing his cards, just, you know.
I stayed at the church I grew up in. Even after I stopped like attending and going, I stayed active in like the youth group and stuff, just because they were all my friends. And I helped out at the little summer camps they had, being a counselor. But at some point, the religious part for me just kind of tapered off, and it happened because in high school I was around it like all day, every day. You know, it was. We had a whole.
I mean, it was called John Paul.
Yeah, exactly. It was a Catholic.
Yeah,
it was a religious based institution. And so I went into it with my loosely held, you know, beliefs and faith. Yeah. And then I'd say probably somewhere around halfway through it didn't even really take that long. It was like halfway through sophomore year, I had taken enough, you know, world history classes, and theology had taught me enough about not just Christianity, but, you know, all other religions.
You gained the exposure.
I gained exposure to everything. And I mean, I'd already kind of gotten exposure to the world religions, because in 8th grade we took part of our social studies class was a world religions section. So I'd already gotten a little bit of what was the word? Culture. Yeah. So, you know, I already knew that much, but being exposed to it all the time, I kind of was lining up similarities and like seeing things other ways than I had been. And at some point, I just kind of, I just fell off.
Like, it just didn't make sense.
It just didn't make sense.
Well, let me ask this, and actually, I meant to ask Chad this. Has anything happened in your life? Chad, I'll start with you. Has anything happened in your life specifically to cause, impactfully make it, to cause you to closely examine this question? And that's a personal question. If y'all don't want to answer this, it's fine. But, for me, obviously, when my mom died, I mean, all of you know that. Mm-hmm. Has anything like that ever happened where you've had a legitimate, visceral reason to be caught up at night thinking about this? Any sort of impactful, death or like that, anything like that.
Probably just what I.
Because I think that's a part of the journey.
If my parents are,
if it had happened, you wouldn't. Yeah, that's.
My parents were doing what they were doing in vain, it would be a cruel joke.
Okay.
Because of the experiences I've seen.
So in that case, I would say no. The answer is no, because if it has, if it's something that is clear, in my case, it's abundantly obvious that is one thing that is a pivotal point in your life that has caused this to become at the absolute forefront of your mind. And it literally shapes the way you look at how you want to conduct your entire life as a human being on the planet. Cancer.
I've got 3 of them.
I think, and that's one reason I'm really glad Nick is here, because I know Nick has had this self-discovery.
Yeah, just to preface it, it's going to get pretty dark when I talk.
Yeah. So, and I want to identify that within each of us to see if they've ever had that one catalyst to really, actually consider it.
I went through a lot of that when I went through withdrawal.
So that would be like an existential crisis, we'll call it. Will, have you had anything like that happen to you?
I wouldn't say I've had anything life changing that was just completely changed my view. I have had something that has it is the one thing that has happened that has kept me from going full tilt atheist.
Right.
And it's going to sound really kind of funny when I say it, to be honest. It was freshman year of high school. I was with my dad and my brother. I was helping my brother's Cub Scout troop with a camp out. They were spending the night at the Cumberland Science Center.
Yeah.
The Adventure Science Center, and I had this dog growing up that I got her for my 5th birthday. She was really old by freshman year.
Tell me you didn't know.
That night she died.
Okay.
That night, while I was asleep at Cumberland Adventure Science Center, I had a dream. In the dream, there was an ambiguous figure standing next to my dog, and he was taking her away from me. Mm-hmm. And I was doing everything in my power to try and get to her and I was just kicking and screaming and just don't take her, leave her, please, and he was taking her away from me. And I get home the next morning, and she's died.
Okay, so that would qualify.
Yeah, that's one thing that it's always kept me from just going full tilt. There's nothing,
And I'm just trying to set some sort of precedent as people are listening to kind of understand the approach that we're all taking to this. You know?
Yeah.
Johnny, I mean, it's really a simple question. Yeah, what do you think? Have you had anything like that in your life happen?
Nothing so sudden.
Okay.
I think it's just been curiosity is where what's led me to.
Right. And I think, that's one thing I don't want to say emphasize, but I think that is one thing. There are a lot of, who has not seen the debates and who has not had these kind of conversations before, but there is a markedly different response that you get from people that have that amount of conviction that I know Nick has, because there has been a cause and they have had such a magnificent, indescribable blow to their life that they literally, I don't even know, and you probably, I know you empathize with this. I know I'm speaking through you right now. It's like you get it. It's like you can't describe it. It's just everything in life just appears to you differently.
It does.
And everything is just different. It's just, and I think that's something that a lot of times probably doesn't, to a lot of people, doesn't happen throughout their life.
Not until some massive trauma happens now.
Right. And it all kind of, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but there has to be something in your life that you do care so passionately about that, could cause that. And that's another part of it, is the depth of, of the character of the person that, is on the journey or anything. But so, where are you today? We'll get back to the point at hand. Will, today, where do you stand?
I would say I'm not even really religious anymore. Like I would, yeah.
So you've checked out.
I've checked out. I wouldn't go so far as to call myself atheist.
Right.
But at the same time, I wouldn't say that the higher power that I may or may not think is up there is a divine higher power.
Right.
They may just be, as we've talked about before, like some sort of advanced civilization, like in Prometheus, where they plant the life seed and the civilization goes.
So you acknowledge the possibility that maybe there's a governing force, but you're not going to be writing home about it or anything and like actively searching for it.
Right, exactly. I mean, but I would love to know.
Okay.
But it's something that, like, I feel like, you know, if they want to let us know they're there, if they want to be an active, you know, if they want to intervene or at least be like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
They will.
But you're okay. You're totally cool with it not happening. Like, it's a known unknown, right?
Yeah, I'm
And you're
totally cool. If
basically
it
living your
never
life
happens,
okay.
if I never experience it, okay.
Yeah, and I respect that. I mean, that you know where you stand, and I think that's important. Let's go, Johnny. Let's go with you next.
So I guess it all started out, I grew up in a Christian household, and all I really knew was that there was a God, and we were supposed to worship Him. And I didn't really think anything other than that until I actually moved out and started seeing the world and learning everything for myself. And then I think that kind of formed into, I started getting really, kind of like Chad said, got really into science and what I can prove and what I know. So once I got on that, that's when I started making the transition of questioning things instead of just accepting them because that's what I've been told. So finding the religion for myself is what I've been, and which I'm still doing now, because I'd love to say that there is, you know, something up there that runs everything, and that's the reason why we're here. But I honestly can't say that with 100% certainty, so I'm still in that maybe.
So you question it.
Yeah, I
Do you
question.
consider, like, again, I hate the labeling thing, but if one were to corner you and say you have to prescribe a label to yourself, would you say yes? Like, you are a believer? Which hat would you put on, you know? The yes or the no?
That's a tough one. I'd say I believe because I think it's good to have something to believe in.
But then, that would beg the question, obviously, because hearing your own thought process play out.
Well, why wouldn't you,
You
just
don't
make
want
it science?
Yeah, you don't want to believe something simply for the sake of it being what you want to be. Like that is what we call what's the term? Delusion, right? Like that when people get into that hole where they literally believe that reality is something that it's not simply because they want it to be. You know, and that's a dangerous position in life to be in because that is a place where one can fester. Like Denzel, okay, one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard was Denzel Washington. He said, "Never confuse movement with progress." You know, it's easy to get caught in that delusion where you're in a position where you think things are moving forward, but they're not, and you don't want to believe something for the sake of, you know, that's what you want to be reality.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's not so much that I'm just at that crossroads in my life, and maybe it'll change in the future. But at right now, if I don't understand something, I go and I research it and I look it up and I figure out what the right answer is. But this religion, it's not really something that you can do that.
Yeah, there's
It's
no
hard
rock.
to quantify.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, if you could prove it, you wouldn't need faith.
Precisely. The term wouldn't exist. Yeah, exactly.
You would
You're
need
right.
it. It'd just be a different branch of science.
Right. So okay. Well, at least so you're aware of it. So let me ask you this though: how right now? I mean, is it a priority even? And it's perfectly fine. When I was your age, it wasn't for me. Like I didn't ask these questions. You know.
No, I mean it's something I always think about. You know, I wonder what's really going on. But to say that it runs, you know, my life.
Right.
No, nothing like that.
Okay.
I can't change whatever the answer is. That can't change. So I'm content with whatever happens.
Right. Okay. That's a good. So that's where you are. Mm-hmm. All right, Mike.
I was raised in a Christian family. We moved around a lot. When we came and stayed with my grandparents, we always went to the same church. My grandfather was like treasurer and like one of the deacons or whatever. Helped out at the church a lot. When we weren't with my grandparents.
What denomination was it?
That was Southern Baptist. But with my parents, we bounced around a lot of different churches, trying to find one that made them happy.
Was it different always Southern Baptist, or was it just...
It was normally Baptist, maybe a couple of non-denominationals,
Okay.
but I think they were looking for a church home that made them happy.
Yeah, okay.
Or whatever, because that can be hard to find, like the right...
You want to click.
Yeah. I guess, so I was raised that way, and then things started to change a little bit for me when I started getting into science and stuff, like you guys said. But
what age is this around?
This was probably around like just before 10 or whatever. Okay. I really got into, everyone loved dinosaurs. I got into paleontology.
Okay.
So like I started looking at fossils and stuff like that, and looking at everything. You hear a lot of people say, you know, it was so many thousand years ago. The Bible was only 5,000 years ago. Blah blah blah. But to me, the argument, you know, an hour is a day to God or whatever. Had that, so that the time thing never bothered me. But one day I was in there...
Semantics.
In my... Yeah. One day I was in my room flipping through my little dinosaur book, and at the back was a timeline of human evolution. And I was, like, excited because I had never really heard of it. And I think that's a good age to encounter stuff like that.
Yeah.
But,
that's a unique...
So, like, I went and showed my dad, and my dad was like, well... You know, we don't know about that. You know, and he's like, and he was really torn. You could tell he's having a real dad moment, and he didn't.
I tore those pages out.
He didn't know what to say. But as I got older, and you know, stuff like that, like it, I was in early high school. You know, maybe junior high. We had junior high back in my day.
Right. Yeah.
But I was probably like in junior high when I found out there was never a worldwide flood. There would be obvious evidence for a worldwide flood. Stuff like that. So it was like cracks were starting to appear, you know, in the facade.
Did Jonah live in the fish's mouth, for example?
Yeah.
You know,
those things. Like the like, really big stuff.
Especially when whales don't have a mouth.
Right.
You know, just a lot of the really fantastic stuff out of the Bible. So, I mean, it was extremely gradual. But I got to a point to where I was questioning everything in the Bible and being like, you know, maybe I don't believe. But later on, and it was something that came with age, was that no matter what, I believed those first few books of the New Testament, I believed the message.
The message?
Yeah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, you know, those... That's the most power to me. You know, that's the climax of the Bible, and everything else almost is just what happened. You know, the post.
Right.
The falling action.
Yeah, the falling action.
Yeah.
And
literary elements.
Yeah.
And so eventually it became part of my belief system that one day it just dawned on me. It doesn't matter if a lot of it's allegorical. It doesn't really matter. As long, to me, personally,
right.
All that matters is that New Testament message in the first few books of the New Testament. You know, the overall message.
That's a really good...
do unto others, you know, all of that.
Right.
And like I said, even as I got older in my high school years and early college years, you know, the book of Revelations, Bible scholar-wise, is questionable as heck, man. I mean, literally, you know,
Subject
bad pun, but, you know...
It has questionable sound.
Yeah, right. But it's a lot of our visions of hell and stuff like that don't even come from that. It comes from Dante's writings and stuff like that. You know, like we were talking about in that post one day. But to me, it became to where outside of the first few books of the New Testament, that it really didn't matter if it was allegorical, because it was people's perceptions of something they didn't understand happening.
Right.
And, you know, and as a cynic, you can be like, oh, well, they just, you know, blew up the story or whatever. You know, he didn't slay that many people with the jawbone of an ass or whatever. And to me, none of that really matters. It's just the overall message from the beginning of the New Testament.
That's actually, okay, so let's pause for a second. And one of the things that when we talk about a topic is we try to determine or identify the topic's purpose to begin with. And one thing that you just hit on, which I don't think we have yet, so I'm really, really glad that you said that. One, I want to say that you probably have one of the most level-headed approaches to Christianity, I think, that I've heard. You know, because you kind of get it, that the nitty-gritty detail, who cares, really, if any of this happened anyway, because none of it matters now.
So much of it, much of the dogma doesn't seem
and
necessary.
all that, and even if it does, even if it happened or if it didn't, the point is, all it does today is contribute to conflict and argument. Because you've got one side saying it happened, you've got one side saying it did not, and all that is left is to argue why it did and did not. So it literally serves no purpose other than to argue over. Well, and what good is coming of that? So your point is that, like, what is all of this? Why does this matter anyway? Like, what is the point of all of this? And you're saying what you're taking out of it is the theme, the motif, and as a writer, that's why I'm so vehemently supportive of what you're saying, is because you freaking got it. Whoever wrote the Bible, you took out the message, the actual message, the motif, and the theme of why the Bible was written. It was to teach value systems and morals and guidelines, and it wasn't to say
a lot of people view, and like we see here mainly Catholic and Protestant views on the Bible, but like worldwide our views on Christianity are
and
like
people
here.
have no idea about
and there's
that,
all sorts
and
of
that's the whole
like
thing, though.
mysticism and stuff like that all over the world that consider themselves Christian,
right?
You know, so
it's amazing.
I can be perfectly honest with this. I know absolutely nothing about Greek Orthodoxy.
Yeah,
I know it's Christian, but I mean that's
right,
about all I know.
I knew a couple in high school.
When I was in Russia, I went to a bunch of Orthodox churches over there, and it was not what we would call Orthodox. You know what I'm saying? It was like Catholicism,
right.
like took some drugs and did something weird, and it had all of the pomp and circumstance from Catholicism, but it was like a strange take on all of it. And all of that just resulted from separating from the Pope.
But I think really the one thing that I want to focus on at this point specifically is that you, after interpreting everything and perceiving everything and the sensory overload that you get when a religion is being put upon you, you actually had the level-headedness to realize what the whole point of it was.
Well, it's not like that happened overnight.
I'm not saying it didn't. I mean, but honestly, like, take a compliment when it's compliment is due. But absolutely, because I'm telling you, when people sit down, if God wrote the Bible, when He was writing it, I guarantee you, I don't presume to know what God knows or thinks, but as a writer, if He doesn't care if you believed whether or not David killed Goliath, He wants you to understand the message that He's portraying behind the book. Like, that's the only thing when you're sitting down to write something, and I never realized this until I started writing, is you never realize that until you write something. It's not the story that really matters, it's the message behind the story that really matters. It's the things like Star Wars, for example. I saw a thing where George Lucas was talking about, my whole point really, it's cool that this universe was created and that all these people and fans were created, but my whole purpose was good and evil, and like good and bad, the force, the light, the dark, like all of these metaphors and motifs that were so prevalent in the story, but and you don't even like realize it until you hear him talk about it, and it's like, oh, that makes, yeah.
Well, like what you guys were talking about science challenging your faith. You can also get to the other end of that, and where I said there was no, global flood, science pretty much says there was no global flood, but there was massive regional flooding all across the world. So all these flood narratives came from something, because
Right.
it's in every world religion.
Yeah.
And they said, you know, the Persian Gulf during biblical times may have been dry.
Right.
You know, like the Black Sea may have been dry. So these stories could be...
They're grounded in
these
truth.
these stories are probably the oral tradition of maybe not the people who survived, but the people who were up on the hill and said, "Oh, those guys are screwed."
Yeah, right.
You know,
they're the accounts of the people that were watching.
I mean, there's a lot of it. To me, is it retains the same message whether it's allegorical or not.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people like, and this was, I don't know if you've read it, Matt, but Ishmael is like a classic. It's really
Within the Bible.
No. Ishmael is a it was a fiction book, but it deals with a lot of these themes, and the main theme in it was that the story of Cain and Abel is an origin story, you know, an origin myth or
Right.
whatever, but it's not ours. It's not Western civilizations.
Really?
It's saying that part of Genesis came as a for once the losers got to write the history, and what it's saying is Cain is the agriculturalist, Abel is the pastoralist, and the agriculturalist killed the pastoralist.
Really?
Yeah, and that's like really.
Who wrote it?
It's called Ishmael. It was like a classic, like during like the late 70s, early 80s or something like that.
I'll have to look that up.
It's really cool, and it deals with stuff like that. But you know, you can see that as an allegory of you know, the first great scientific revolution for us was agriculture.
Yeah.
And you can even, I've heard people take that even farther back and say Cain and Abel, you know, now that we know that we have Neanderthal DNA in us, maybe Cain and Abel is an allegory of our genocide against the Neanderthals.
Man, reality is stranger
Dan Quinn,
than...
by the way.
Who?
Daniel Quinn.
Daniel Quinn, okay. And so... We'll wrap up with yours of where you are today, but again, I do want to emphasize what you did say, because you obviously have a clear grip on the fact that the point of religion, the point of these, you know, doesn't matter what doctrine you believe in or whatever. All of it's really existing. The purpose of it is it exists to give you a guideline on how to conduct yourself as a human, how to treat other people, how to live, and a lot of it, obviously, and we'll get to the afterlife later. But is that like I have a lot of respect for how you took the message out of you know, I just can't say that enough. So today,
I just see Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as the greatest hits, and the rest of it's kind of B-sides.
They don't like
you
walking
know, they're
around
still
like the
relevant
18.
to the anthology,
You can
but
find that.
you know.
Matthew, Mark. So today, where would you, just in a concise little blurb, where would you say today you find yourself in terms of spirituality? And
I mean, I'm still searching. You know, I'm not completely sold that it's not ancestor simulation or whatever. You know,
Right.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's almost a moot point, because if it was advanced aliens or whatever, we would perceive something on a magnitude that advanced to be God anyway.
yeah.
So it doesn't really matter.
I mean, ultimately,
which
can
one
we
it
really
is.
do anything about any of this anyway? No, obviously not. You know, but it certainly is something that should be considered more often, because it does dictate how we treat people.
Yeah.
You know, this conversation.
No, well, morality
dictates a lot of
isn't
things.
based on a religion.
Not in and of itself, but I mean, your search of what it means to exist is what dictates. Because if you don't care what's going to happen after you die, that's going to determine in a lot of cases what your behavior is going to be. If you don't have a ramification of the cause and effect relationship, you know, those types of things. If you just simply don't care. So I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts to it. But anyway, Nick, your turn.
Okay. To touch on that, though, if, like I said, putting a hat on that, if morality stemmed from my beliefs of the afterlife, I would be a horrible person, which I would consider myself not being one. I, take care of my kids. That's the most important thing for me, and that's where my morality comes from. I do whatever I need to make sure that my kids and wife are well taken care of. and that's the whole foundation of what I am. But to talk about, I guess it's from a standpoint of not when I found my faith, but when I lost my faith. You know, thinking about it when y'all were talking, most of my belief, I guess, deterioration revolves around cancer. Not only my own, but of my grandmother's. I lost my grandmother to a brain tumor when I was 9. And I backtracking a little bit, I grew up Methodist, so I grew up in a Christian household. We weren't strongly religious. I wouldn't consider my mom a Christian at this point. I don't think she believes, but my dad still does. But, you know, went to church most Sundays, and, you know, wholeheartedly believed in God. My grandmother passed a very, very painful death when I was 9, and people on my dad's side, especially my granddad's, who was her husband's, relatives were saying, oh, well, God needed her more. You know, it was just her time. God. Yeah. I can see Chad shaking his head over there.
It's like, don't get me started.
God needed her more. And I'm like, no, that's bullcrap. Why does God, an omnipotent being, omnipresent, you know, can literally morph the world with his hands, need my grandmother more than I do? Secondly, if he needed her, why didn't he just blink her out of existence? She had a heart attack and dropped dead. Why would she...
Why didn't he give her away to begin with?
Right. Yeah. Why does she have to go through agonizing pain for literally 10 years, trying to hold on as long as she can to, you know, be there for me and her son, my dad? So that's when I started questioning stuff. Science does have a lot to do with it, but it's more my belief structure is stuff that's happened personally to me.
Do you mind sharing, so we can provide context, your story?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
That's going to be the second part.
The coup de grace?
Right.
Yeah.
But in high school, started completely losing my faith. Never really considered myself an atheist, but, you know, I wasn't an outlier in high school, but it was kind of, you know, I wouldn't say my thing, but I didn't just jam it down people's throat that I wasn't a Christian, didn't believe in God, but, you know, I was a pretty hateful person about it, you know, like, oh, well, that's stupid, you know, like, oh, why are you going to church? That's stupid. I don't believe in
But
God.
you had a reason to. You had that story behind it, which I didn't know.
Right.
You know.
But then, go through college, nothing really changes. There's no big earth-shattering things that happen in college. Still don't really believe. And then, got married. 23, had 2 kids, and when I was 25 in 2013, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that was a pretty cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
You know, I was worried about dying, and it's, you know, I consider this kind of hypocritical, but all of a sudden I find religion again, and actually had quite a few conversations with Grindstaff, and, you know, now that we're here, man, thank you for talking to me. I was going through a real tough time, and he talked to me at least on a weekly basis, see how I was doing. We talked a lot about the afterlife, but so I found religion again, and got through cancer. I'm in remission now, so I'm not having to worry about that, but 2013 pretty much sucked out loud. It traumatized my kids quite a bit. They're over it now. Thankfully, my daughter doesn't remember it at all, but for a while, every time that I would go to the doctor, my son would freak out. Like, he was like, no.
How old were they at that point?
1 and 2. They just turned 1 and 2 when I was diagnosed.
He had a basic understanding, like, kind of what's going on?
He saw me deteriorate. You know, I lost about 100 pounds.
Right.
I was, you know... People can't see me, but I'm a really big dude. I played college offensive line. And
the voice didn't give it away.
Right.
He's a lumberjack.
I dropped down to 250, and for a normal person, that's, you know, I doubt anyone in this room weighs 250, but for me...
Statement of dropping down to get to 250.
Right. But for me, I looked like a skeleton. So he didn't know exactly what was going on, but throughout the years, you could see that it affected him, but nothing that we can notice at this point. Yeah. But I got through that. I was, you know, I was so religious at that point. Wasn't going to church because I still wasn't feeling good. But, you know, like we were talking about earlier about GD. Like, I would not say GD. I would not use the Lord's name in vain. do now, unfortunately, but I probably shouldn't do that. You know, I even feel hypocritical when I use my Lord's name in vain. When I'm like I say, "Oh my God," I'm like, "Wait, I don't believe in Him."
But
Why
you're
am I
not
saying that?
right. Yeah. But I think we understand. You don't do it like out of disrespect.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
Like it's not like it's just to you. It's
Right,
and I think it's a mutual understanding.
I
So
understand that.
right.
right. Yeah.
And how I lost my faith again. I only had it for a short time, but this will be someone y'all know. I don't want to bring her name into this, but we had a friend from high school that ended up dying from lymphoma about a year after I was in remission, and it just sent. I mean, it threw me completely for a loop. I was thinking, like, you know, I consider myself a good person now. I do everything I can for my kids, but I was not a great person in college. Why did God save me? But like, nah, you know, because everybody was telling me, oh, thank God for, you know, curing you of your cancer. I'm like, and my opinion kind of wasn't. No, thank Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Right.
Why was I spared,
Wow.
but she wasn't? And
That's powerful.
Right.
I never. Yeah.
and I guess
Why is
in a
that
sense,
fair? kind
right?
of, you're
Why is
asking,
that fair? I guess I have survivor's guilt from that.
Yeah, I can understand that.
So that's kind of where I lost it again. But saying in that I'm atheist in all but one thing, I really like the notion of an afterlife because I want, not so much for my sake, but I want to see my loved ones
That's the pitch.
that has passed on. Kind of my thought process on it is, if God is an all-loving God, if I don't believe, because that's one of my biggest hang-ups on it, and I think it's awesome that you have seen, you know, the hand of God. I haven't, and that's where my hang-ups are. If something happened in my life where it was like, bam, here it is, then I would flip
Well,
one
so
seat.
okay, it's important to identify that you are open.
Right, yes.
Okay, so you're not closed off in terms of, like, when we say atheism. You're not closed off enough to say, I'm absolutely certain there is no God. Nothing you say or do will
Correct.
will convince me otherwise.
And there was actually a moment that this is one of the big hang-ups. I was going through treatment, and the tumor was wrapped around my heart. So it sent me into atrial fibrillation because of all the chemo that I was going through and the pressure on my heart. It actually started messing up my heart rhythm. Yeah. So they had to put 2 diodes down my throat and shock my heart back into regular rhythm.
Jeez.
But when I was under anesthesia, and that's what I was talking about, you know, you're talking about, were you under psychedelics when you saw this? I had a dream while I was under, and unfortunately I've had like 14 surgeries at this point. I don't ever remember anything from surgery except for this one. And I had a dream where I was at my granddad's house. My granddad has passed on as well. Then me and him were just in his front yard, and he was like, hey man, everything's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Everything's good. And I woke up crying, and, you know, I remember coming out of the anesthesia, and they're like, what's wrong? And I was like, oh, I just talked to my granddad. And
Did you say he was passed away when you had the dream?
yes, yeah, he passed away when I was like 12.
Okay.
So yeah, it wasn't like he passed while
He
I was
wasn't still
under.
alive, right?
Right, yeah,
So-
no, he passed, you know, a decade.
So that falls within the realm of reason.
Right.
For that to have, yeah. Okay.
But when I was waking up from anesthesia, I was crying, and they were asking what was wrong, and I was explaining to them, I just talked to my granddad, and they're like, oh, well, it's just hallucinations from anesthesia. So, and it's like...
Thanks, Doc.
right, exactly.
All right.
But, you know, it's like...
I wouldn't cancel the chaplain.
Yeah, seriously.
my mind. Right?
Never mind, you know, it's...
No offense to doctors, but some of them are the biggest jerks.
Oh, yeah. I've had a handful of good ones, and then a
Yeah.
couple ones that you're just like...
The nurses are great, always. But
Nurses are always great, but it's just like, can you just shut up and leave? Just treat me and just leave me alone.
But it does require a very specific character to be able to be around death.
But I always want my medical staff to be like, at least bedside manner, to be like religiously neutral.
Right?
I really don't want to know.
Like, can you at least pretend for a minute? You know?
But that's my
Feelings exist.
biggest hang up on belief. It's like, I haven't seen anything besides that. I would like to think that I was actually talking to my granddad, but I guess my cynical side, my analytic side, it really just was the anesthesia.
Right.
Then
Right.
I would so like to believe in something that's higher, and
Yeah.
it would be great if it was. But like I was saying, if if there is a God and I'm wrong, I hope that he sees the good deeds that I've done throughout my life, and hey man, you accept me now.
Yeah.
Well, open arms. But that's
depending on the dogma. Of each individual church,
right?
Like half of them, as long as you believed at some point, you're fine.
Right.
We got your fire insurance.
That makes a lot of sense, but you did have that, so yeah.
Well, I was confirmed in the Methodist Church, so I'm probably okay.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, the one thing I noticed and kind of that stuck out to me in that was that one moment where the fairness kind of came into question. That I don't know. I didn't know that was a part of that. What caused that decision, but that makes a lot of sense. And I would probably say, I mean, what you just said pretty much probably will save us a lot of time, because I think you and I are on identical wavelengths there, because there is nothing, and I'm not going to sit here and make myself cry, but my mother was unquestionably the most benevolent, innocent, good, kind human being imaginable. Like, I couldn't create a character who was a better person than my mom.
And that's how I felt about my grandmother, and that's why.
And I'm sure plenty of it, and sadly a lot of people don't, but I mean, I know a lot of people have those influences in their lives, right? And losing her, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, I'm not going to smear anybody's names or anything, but there was a lot of family dynamic going on, and some of the things that she persevered and put up with for the sake of us, and that, like, losing her just was the absolute biggest blow to me that I can fathom will ever happen to somebody in the human experience. Like, that is, there is nothing that could instill a stronger emotion, whether good or bad, in somebody than that type of thing. And that is really the day, because my history, I was raised Catholic, right? My mom, in fact, go figure, was very devout. My mom had a very strong relationship with God, and we were raised Catholic. My dad was raised Southern Baptist, but she won that battle because she was the more devout, So we were raised Catholic. She taught the Sunday school. She taught our confirmation class. Jackie Patel was in our confirmation class. Like, a lot of, so she was always very strong. And I followed that. Like, I always sort of questioned. Like, I never really thought about it much, but I always did believe in God, Like, I thought he was there, and I tried to live, in that kind of that fear relationship. Like, I want to live a good life, more or less, because you're afraid of what would happen if you don't. And as you all obviously know, I went to Church of Christ with Molly, my high school sweetheart, and so I was always around it growing up. Vanderbilt, when I went there, I wasn't around it a lot. Didn't go to church when I was in college. Got exposed to a lot of different belief systems, grew a lot as a person there. Graduated, and I still really I wouldn't say I'd transformed much, and I went to West Virginia, didn't know anybody but my uncle there. I lived there for 3 years, and I went to a church to meet people. Like, that's, because that was, West Virginia's a different culture, but that was, and at that point I was pretty much still in the same spot. But when I lost Mom, that was the first time that I actually sat down, and as I was going through that experience, that's when every single, like, she was in the ICU for about a month coming up to it, and it was, at first, we didn't, like, she had spent so many years sick. She had, as a background, she had COPD, rheumatoid arthritis, and she was frail, very fragile and frail. Last 5-10 years of her life, she was pretty much confined, 5 years probably, confined to home. That's why reading and writing is so big, because she couldn't do much. She could not get out much. So she read, like, religiously read. Nora Roberts, like, I idolized because of how much joy, as a writer, Nora Roberts gave my mom with her stories. Like, that was what she did. That in Farmville. Which, God bless her, like, it's, the woman is so freaking cute, but...
Hey, man, it's okay. We all got into Farmville at one time.
Yeah, like, and so, like, just seeing that, the last 5 years or so, she always had these times where she would go to the ER, and it'd be scary, because we thought we would lose her, but, she'd fight her way through it. So there were so many times for so long, and that last time when she went, it was like, gradually, it makes you, it's like, this is the one. It's like, it's going to happen this time. And like, that's when I decided, I was like, man, she's told me to write my whole life. She's told me to like do it, and pause. But yeah, so that's when I quit. That's when I quit insurance. And that's when it got me into writing, because I started questioning life and like what really mattered in life and what really was important in life. Like, did I really care about all of these, you know, this house and this life that I'd been conditioned to want, you know, and, you know, to have the biggest house in the block and all this crap that, you know, I look back at now, it's like, it's sickening that I did care about all of that. You know, the first thing I did when I went and got the job at Liberty Mutual was bought a Lexus. And I felt cool. Like, it gave me joy. And in hindsight, it's like disgusting to think, you know,
Right.
to have that elevated feeling when I'm driving it because of a friggin' symbol on my car. And it never occurred to me to think of things that way until I lost my mom. And I just started wondering, it's like, what really does happen after we die? Like, and that's really what made me start this whole journey, is the wanting to try and just think about it, find out. I know I'm never going to, so it sucks, but it's like, what happens after? What's next?
Not to take a complete side note, but that's the whole reason why I got into teaching and coaching. The catalyst of me having cancer, it was, hey, I'm done with sales. I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
I don't like it. I'm going to go follow my passion. I'm going to go coach football.
Right.
You know, and
It's a purpose.
Right. Could I eventually make millions of dollars being a college professional coach? Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen, and I'm perfectly content
But
with
it could.
coaching middle school and high school. You
And
know,
that's
I
all. And
followed
see,
my
that's the
passion.
thing, though. Like, you're doing it for the right reason. You're doing it because you don't care about the fame.
Right.
You don't care about the fortune. That's not what matters. Yes, that could be a byproduct of it, but the irony of all of this is that the people that become the best are the ones that really, usually, the ones that don't care.
Right.
Because they're, and that's exactly why they're so emboldened and impassioned in it, and they become so good at it because that is their life, that is their purpose, that they excel, and the cream will rise to the top.
Right.
So it makes so much sense after you look at it that way, you know. But you're right. It's like, why does anyone really want to look back when they're 85 and look at the timesheets that they had, and when they punched in and punched out and measured their IRAs and their 401ks? No. It's so clear. The only things you're going to care about are your photo albums, your memories, your life, your relationships, and all of those things that really make, when you, like, after everyone in your life is gone, when you're in a room by yourself, and you don't have to worry about what other people are perceiving. They're not watching you. They're not hearing you. Nothing else is there but you and your own thoughts. That is the only time that human beings are unequivocally themselves. There is no other influence whatsoever. You know, because we all are concerned about perception. We get it. Like, that's
Absolutely.
the human condition. When you're by yourself, what types of things matter to you then? And that's really what made me do literally all of this. And I want so badly to try and get that point across. And so many people have done that. Like the guy that wrote The Chicken Soup for the Soul. The guy that, you know, all of these people in society, all these people, they all do it. And it's like, we read it and we absorb it and we get it, but we don't. It's like we don't really get it because we haven't experienced it. I just wish that it was more obtainable, I guess, that understanding to people.
Well, the path to true happiness, in my opinion, and I'm sure Matt feels the same way about this. Of course, we need money to live on. Of course, you need to provide for your family, especially me having children. I've got to provide for them. But I'd coach football for free. That's my passion. I would do it for, if money was no object, I would do it for free. That would be my free time. I would coach kids in football, and I'm sure Matt feels the same way about writing.
Yeah, I would absolutely do it. I mean, and that's really the thing. And, you know, we talked about this last time, kind of in the conspiracy wing. But it's so sad that our society and our whole world has been hijacked by this whole, like, basically brainwashing people into valuing materialism and valuing, like, if you could really, if money, like, if you could think outside the box enough and really conceptualize a world where money just did literally not exist at all, what would you do with your life? Like
play a lot of video games and coach football.
What would you do? Like, honestly, like what? And that's how you really learn what you like.
Yeah. Well, it was like you were talking about, you know, being in a room by yourself or whatever. You know, when it's just me, I'm almost always trying to learn something new.